Welcome to Now for Someone Completely Interesting, brought to you by Vengeance Energy Services, small trailer repair and small equipment rental with mobile mechanical capability. Call Mike at 780-614-7687 or find them on Facebook, Vengeance Energy Services. I'm your host, Ben Poulin. This podcast has actually been a few months in the works, maybe up to 6 months now. We've got a two-time recommended guest, first-time appearance. Things in common. We're both Elk Point alumni. Both worked in radio, both have our own podcast. He is the most esteemed of the esteemed gentlemen, the one, the only, Scott Labrie. Thank you. Finally, we have you on here. So your co-hosts both have recommended you in the past here, and I've been kind of planning this out. The reason it took so long is because we wanted it to jive with kind of a cross promotion with our podcasts,
right?
Because I'll get to join you guys a little later on, too, with the esteemed gentlemen. So thank you for doing for that, and thank you for having me on yours later on. But let's start a little bit, because we're quite a bit apart generationally. Like, how old are you, Scott? Sorry.
28.
Okay.
28.
Okay, that's a big gap. So, but we both grew up in the same small town. So I'm just a little bit curious if there was a lot of similarities in growing up. Tell me a little bit about your experience, or, what you take from growing up in Elk Point and going to school there.
Oh, geez. I might be a little different, too, because I was a town kid. I didn't grow up in the country or anything like that.
Well, I was half and half. I started in the country, and then I finished up my school in town. But
yeah, I mean...
you go to the same school, not like it makes a difference.
Yeah, kind of, I guess, sort of thing. What can you say about Elk Point? It's a quiet little town, and going to school there, like, my mom worked at the school through the whole, period I was at that F.G. Miller.
Right.
So, I mean, it was kind of quiet, and I didn't get into much trouble for the most part. Yeah, I mean, you had your fair share of parties and all that other stuff, bush parties, all that,
So it doesn't sound like it was too much difference. I know that the town literally hasn't changed from the time that I can have my first memories of it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting the fact we both went into radio, but maybe not so much, because I actually, for a period of time, worked with your dad, who was station manager, worked in sales with the local radio station here. So was that part of why you wanted to go into radio, because he had that?
Yeah, I mean, I was always, like, just being around it since I was younger, like, had a familiarity with it. And then, I would originally, coming out of high school, I was going to go to college to be an accountant, and that just fell through. Didn't really like the whole university experience. And then bounced around a few other jobs, working at electronic stores, grocery stores, other things, and it's like, it just didn't feel fulfilling, really. And I always noticed when I was driving, because I would be commuting from Elk Point to St. Paul, I'd be listening to, at the time it was Cool 101.3, and always be, like, listening to the announcers and just kind of picking apart what they were saying and that sort of thing, which is pretty common for radio people. It's like,
Absolutely.
This guy sucks. So I was like, this might be a thing I might be interested in. And then at one point there was an advertisement for a board operator position was opening at Cool to do all the Pontiacs games and live on locations at the time, because now it's just an app. You don't need a board operator anymore. But so I threw in a resume for that, got an email back saying we already hired somebody. It's like, well, all right, never mind then. And then a week later, they called me back saying the person that they wanted to do it, I guess, couldn't do all the hockey games, and they recognized the last name, which is always kind of nice. And so it's like, went into the job, talked with the boss there, and it's like, I kind of recognized it was only one Labrie in Elk Point or whatever, and I had my dad come along, which was just kind of, make sure I get the job kind of
thing. It really is a business. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So, I mean, it's no different than anybody else that got their foot in the door one way or the other. But, I mean, you sure, like, when you listen to the radio, did you ever listen to the old 1310 CHLW and say, I really like how that guy sounds, or?
At the time, not really, because, like, it's always like you don't want to listen to the same music your parents are listening to, so you're listening to 1310 in the car. I was like, this country music, I hate this.
At least I know that I wasn't the one that you picked apart to say I suck because you never listened to me. That's not to say it wouldn't have happened. So when you did decide to pursue that, did you look at a lot of different options as far as schooling, or did you kind of already know which way you wanted to go with that?
Because I mean, around here, I mean, like, there's Nate's obviously the biggest one in Edmonton, the closest one. But I ended up going to Western Academy Broadcasting College in Saskatoon, WABC, just because I worked with Rob Hunter. He was doing the play-by-play from Pontiacs. He went to there. Danny White from 1310, who worked with my dad, he also went there. And the big swing point for me was that it was an 8-month program instead of a 2-year program with a required internship. And plus, like, Don Scott, the guy who runs this school, is very much like wanting to get people jobs. Because the way his school works, it's not like the weird, like, law against it, I guess, is like he has to have a certain job placement for him to keep open, I guess, sort of thing.
Okay.
So he would really try hard to get people jobs or internships. So that's kind of my thing. I was like,
okay, so believe it or not, you're not the first guest I've had on this podcast that went to WABC or investigated that as an option for schooling. So it came up a couple times with some previous guests that you could play request songs for the prostitutes across the street. Was that a thing when you went there?
No, not a thing. That must have been an older location, because by the time I went there, there was a Tim Hortons across the street. So I think there was nothing like that. Plus, like all the stations, there was no live station at the time. There used to be, but I guess he got in trouble for running a pirate radio station, so he had to kind of take down the antenna for that. So, yeah.
Well, didn't you say, we were talking just before, there was a guy like from the CRTC with a scanner? Like,
yeah, pretty much. I guess he was walking around the school one day, and then quickly ran upstairs to yank out the cable from the antenna there to.
So in the 8-month program, what did they do? A little bit of everything and just kind of fast track it all, or did you kind of pick off the start, like what kind of avenue you want? Because there's different aspects of radio, like whether you do news, whether you do like as just a regular announcer personality. Creative, like with writing or producing commercials, that kind of stuff. Did you do a little bit of all of that, or what was it like?
The way it worked there is it's relatively small class sizes. I think he only accepts usually up to 15 kids or students, I guess, per year. So upstairs there are 7 studio rooms, and essentially the way they work is one will be a DJ booth, and then the next one will be a news booth, and they will do news for the 2 DJ booths that are beside them. So DJ news, DJ news, DJ, and then a voiceover booth for commercial reading and that sort of thing. Okay. So we would essentially just all 7 of us, I think that's 7, right? Yeah, 7. And then all 7 of us would go up there and then essentially just cycle through. Each morning you'd move to the next one. So I'd start in DJ, do one morning that, and then the next morning, okay, now I'm in news, do news broadcast, and then I'm DJ again, then I'm DJ again, then I'm news, DJ, ad reading, that sort of thing. And then you would have your cassette. It'd all be recorded on cassettes. And you bring that to class the next morning before you get into the booth. Or no, we were after. So we'd have to do our show and then bring it down, and then they would review it essentially and point out all the fuck-ups you did, and there are plenty.
We call them air checks. I had one of my bosses actually called them scare checks, because he'd just rip you apart. You ready for your scare check? Yeah. That was actually after I got into the industry there. So fast track into that. You ended up working. You didn't have as long of a career as you guys do at Hope. Actually, let's go back a little bit. The one thing I'm curious about, because when I went through the program, I had an intention that I was going to go down an avenue like as a play-by-play broadcaster with hockey, or get into kind of sports reporting. But then I found out, after trying a few different things, that I actually just preferred being like the morning or the host, the personality on the radio. Did you go in thinking you were going to go down one avenue and then kind of changed your path a little bit with it, or?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I kind of wanted to be on-air DJ personality. And then I found out like I was also a decent news reader at the time, but I just hated putting together newscasts. It's like, this is the boring part. I just want to make jokes and make people laugh. Screw news, man. And so I kind of more wanted to do that, and then I eventually got into High Prairie, which was my first radio gig, and you had to do both of it. So I kind of got stuck doing news anyway. So
Well, yeah, and it always seems that way too. Because I was the same thing. I wanted to get in, do the on-air thing, and then my first job was in news up in Yellowknife. Um, you end up in some interesting places. There are no regrets, for sure, not on that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, you came in a very interesting time when it comes, and I have some very committed issues, let's say, with the way the industry has gone. It's incredibly disappointing to me that it is like that, especially when you got people like you that are, eager, willing to do something for this industry. Like, how many years did you actually end up working as a broadcaster?
I didn't even think I didn't make a full year. I think I got 10 months because I started working. I think in May, after May long weekend, sounds right, in High Prairie, and then got laid off at the end of March when everything kind of got shut down for COVID there.
Yeah. And see, that's where I took a little bit of issue, because there was companies. I really want to say names. I really want to identify individuals that were involved in it, but I don't know if I should or not. But let's put it this way. Broadcasters clear across the country were given a 2-year grace period where they did not have to pay licensing fees. We're talking millions of dollars of savings that they were supposed to reallocate to employees. And they fired everyone. They laid everybody off. I know, like yourself and at least 4 other people that were shown walking papers when they were supposed to have their jobs protected with this, and everything's automated now. Our local radio station has nothing local. It's so disappointing.
Yep.
But I guess what, but yeah, do you want to say something? Because this is an open store policy. I've got no qualms with you saying.
I know. I mean, like, some people were definitely upset. Like, I mean, I had a bunch of everybody I worked with got laid off essentially. So there were some people who were threatening to sue and all this other stuff. And I was under the impression, I was like, well, I mean, there's only one person working in St. Paul. They should be able to hire one person back. So I was just like, I'll be hired back in September or October, whenever they said it'd be. And then they got the call, and then it's like, yeah, we're not bringing you back. And I was like, that's when it did kind of hurt. I was like, shit.
Yeah.
But,
and I think it's hurt the community as well, as far as having any content. But here, let's look at what's evolved out of this, because this podcast platform has really taken off in a way. And I like to see that. I mean, this is something this is like therapy for me, because I loved being in radio. I had a lot of other reasons for quitting and stuff. So this draws me back into it. It's costing me more money than it's making, believe me, even with sponsorship.
for sure. Well, we don't even have sponsors. So.
It doesn't
count yourself lucky.
It doesn't get you any further ahead, believe me. But it's fun anyways, and it's actually kind of flattering that you get approached that way. But anyways, back on track here is that I think this is something that could definitely benefit the community. So what was that part of the idea why you got into the podcast with the Esteemed Gentlemen? Or like, because you're kind of am I right in saying that you're kind of the foundation behind it, or okay, I got Tyler behind the camera, who's one of your co-hosts, and he's saying that this was your initiative, I guess.
I mean, I guess I kind of approached the other 2 guys to do it. I mean, me and Tyler and Eric always go to the parties, and we have friends, and of course we get a little silly and that sort of thing, and we always seem to be the guys entertaining everybody. So we always got asked, like, you guys should do a podcast, you guys should do something. And I was working at the radio station at the time, and it's like, I don't really think I need to do that. And then once I got laid off, it's like kind of same thing like you were saying. Like, it is just like a creative outlet that I didn't have anymore, that it's just nice to do that kind of same thing again. And yeah, just you're just sitting around talking with your friends about movies, video games, and stuff we'd normally talk about, and just hit record and put it on the internet now. So
and it's the same. Like, I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, it's like whether anybody listens to it or not, it's this is what actually I get the enjoyment of. This is the payoff here.
Yeah,
is meeting people, getting to know a little bit about it, and like you said, you guys get your creative outlet on it a little bit, and maybe something does. I think one day something does catch on, and maybe it does become a viable way to make a living. But what have been some of your like favorite topics or things that you've done since you've started the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a couple skits. We did the the wrestling skit, which was pretty much like all me for the
I
most part.
I don't
Like,
recommend any of that stuff. Well, some of that stuff I do recommend, but there was one little blurb in there that
I appreciated that. I was like, I remember texting Tyler. You think Ben could like wear a shower cap or something and just like put his hands up in the air and like cheer? And then you just went full out, putting soap on yourself, and like, wow, this is way more than I was expecting. This is awesome. But yeah, just
was
yeah,
that was all your idea though, right?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, I think maybe Tyler was like, we should do a wrestling skit, and I think Tyler did come up with the original script.
Okay.
And then I just basically changed like 80% of it because I was like, nah, this is not how wrestling works, Tyler.
But you're actually a big wrestling fan though.
I am, yeah.
Yeah. And right, we were just before COVID hit. There was supposed to be a production coming out Point. They had been there the year before, and you had already set yourself up to be involved with that as well.
That was super. That might have been the most heartbreaking thing of the whole COVID thing. Was I was gonna finally live my dream of being in an actual wrestling ring. I was gonna cut a promo, basically just tearing down my opponent, or not my opponent. I'm the manager of whoever this guy is. I was gonna tear the guy down, and being an Elk Point, I was gonna be just get heat on myself and just talk crap about Mark Letestu and basically say like my client is 10 times the athlete as Mark Letestu is, and all this other stuff. And I wanted to get put through a table, like maybe fall off the apron, fall through a table. They did not want me to do that. So,
I think there is still an avenue there, and I think you should maybe start pushing the agenda of that little wrestling video you did, and then just seeing if maybe a promotion will pick you up, and then when the time comes, we'll be there to cheer you on, or jeer you on, as I guess the case may be.
Yeah, well, yeah, you definitely got to boo me for sure. So.
Yeah, that was actually, I was going to point that out. The other one you guys did was that the
X-Men one.
The X-Men one. Yeah, yeah. Whose idea was that?
I don't even know. Like, I don't even know how that one came to. Well, I know we were going to do. The podcast topic was casting the new X-Men because they're coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So we're like, and then we were just discussing we should do some skits and stuff like that. So I just I think I came up with the idea. It's like, hey, let's do an X-Men skit that leads into the X-Men topic. And then we just kind of, just went back and forth, kind of writing it out and pitching jokes and all this other stuff. And then I think I came up with the Eric bit where I was like, Eric should come out, Tyler should yell for Professor X, which is going to be Eric because he's in the wheelchair. But then Eric comes out and he's also got Wolverine claws, and you guys get in a spat and all this other stuff.
If people want to see these clips, though, it's all through the Esteemed Gentlemen
the wrestling one is, I think Tyler posted the X-Men skit to his own personal channel.
Okay, which is Aviator Productions.
Aviator Productions.
Okay. Strongly suggest you guys check those ones out because they actually were brilliant. I watch them repeatedly and still laugh every time. Yeah. Even just thinking about it. Yeah. What do I? Eric's come. What do I have to be Professor? I'm in a wheelchair. and then whose knives are more real, the guy with butter knives or the guy with cardboard cutouts?
Yeah.
The other thing that really catches my attention with your podcast, and I understand that this is solely you, is the thumbnails that you guys do for each podcast.
Yeah.
Where do you come up with the ideas for that? Because each podcast has its own thumbnails, which features pictures of you guys.
Yep.
How do you do that? And why aren't you doing that professionally? That you should be charging people for that.
I don't know. Like, I think for the first few podcasts, I wasn't doing it, and then I think the first one we did like a Ask Us Anything podcast where we just took questions, and then I was like, put us in the Jeopardy set or something like that, and I just found pictures of the guys online. I know how to Photoshop stuff from high school. We took that like in the computers course, so I just kind of cut everybody out, kind of put them in the picture. It sounds easier than it actually is, I guess, sort of, but
well, we didn't. Okay, there's a difference. When I went to high school, we played Oregon Trail, and we didn't do Photoshop. So, just to give you an idea of the generation gap.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. Sure.
But what gives you some of the ideas? Actually, the one I really liked was the one you did with all the movies you did right around Christmas time.
Oh yeah.
And my favorite,
the movie posters. Yeah.
My absolute favorite was the one you did of Tyler as Elf.
Oh yeah. That one like fit seamlessly. It was so perfect.
It was bang on. But what I loved about it, he strongly dislikes Will Ferrell and he hates that movie.
Yeah.
So it was perfect. he's trying not to laugh. Is there anything like else, I guess, besides the podcast that kind of captivates your interest? You're a big basketball fan too.
Big basketball fan. Yep. Raptors for the most part. I'll pay attention to some other teams come playoff time, but usually just Raptors.
I can't stand basketball.
Oh, really? See, for me, it's basketball's great because it's fun on the court, but it's even more fun off the court because all the guys are talking shit on it on Twitter and all this other stuff. NHL's all prim proper guys. They're all saying the correct responses. NBA, they're going crazy. They're trading everybody all the time, and it's free agents are like, yeah, screw it. Let's all decide to sign with one super team. And
have you been to a live NBA game?
Not NBA. I went to an Edmonton Stingers game last year, but that was.
I hear that would draw a lot of people in. Is actually the live experience of the sporting event. I tried to do that with Major League Baseball, and I don't know. That was way back when the Houston Astros weren't cheating and weren't that good. But they always say the atmosphere and the experience, and a lot of people say, well, no, if you've ever been to a live NBA game, that like completely changes it. So, but yeah, I was kind of hoping you might have had that experience.
One day, hopefully.
One day, yeah, for sure. As far as the podcast goes, do you guys have any kind of set plan or directive, or is it just kind of a go with the flow type of thing for now?
Yeah, just go with the flow. I mean, I'd like to start doing more kind of video game gameplay videos, that sort of thing. Just because they're kind of easier to do, and we're playing games anyways, so might as well do it. And then just try and grow it as much as possible. I mean, the end goal is to hopefully be able to support all of us, and that becomes a full-time job, but
would be nice.
Takes time and luck, so it's just kind of...
You kind of have to grow it organically, too. Get the friends, get the people talking, and you got to give it a few years, I would think, at least. But, like, I said, in the meantime, like, I don't know about you guys. I'm having fun with this. I'm actually looking forward to joining you guys to see what it's like with more than just one guest on it, and actually not be the one that has to dictate the control and the direction of the podcast so much. Not that I really dictate it, but I try to keep the flow going anyways. So, but Scott, thank you very much for doing this. And I don't know if you're familiar with the way we wrap things up here or not. Have you had a chance to listen to a couple?
Not all the way through. So
okay. Before we wrap it up, I just want to ask you that this podcast is called Now for Someone Completely Interesting, which is why we brought you on. So as someone who is completely interesting, if you could recommend a person, not saying that they would have to come on or anything like that, but off the top of your head, if you could recommend someone for this podcast, who would you think of?
You know what? He probably won't do it. But my dad, Brian Labrie.
I would do that. I worked with him for a couple of years. He had a lot of, you know what? He was really good at guiding people, actually. He was very subtle and very kind of under the radar. It was really interesting. I didn't want to do something, and all of a sudden I was doing it. How the hell did he get me to do that? So, good idea. Actually, and I think he might just because of his background in radio. It'd be interesting. Know. He's so many years. He's still working in radio, isn't he?
Yep.
In sales?
Yep.
Okay. So, excellent. So, thank you again. This is Scott Labrie. That's Scott with 2 T's. And as I mentioned earlier, I went to school with a guy named Scott. He spelled it with 1 T, and he was a complete douchebag. And if he's listening to this podcast, well, he knows it.
Fix your life, Scott.
Thank you so much. This has been another edition of Now for Someone Completely Interesting, brought to you by Vengeance Energy Services. Small trailer repair and small equipment rental with mobile mechanical capability. Call Mike at 780-614-7687 or find them on Facebook, Vengeance Energy Services. If you've enjoyed this episode, give our other episodes a listen. Give us a like. Please subscribe. And thank you once again. Now for Someone Completely Interesting.